Hello, and here's my battle report, after action report on our epic Gulf Strike battle between me and Joe. Joe was playing the Soviets, I was playing the Iranian US coalition. We were playing scenario number 2, and Joe is now prepared. Now he feels like a true Russian. We were playing scenario number 2. And for those who don't know Gulf Strike, Scenario 2 has a made-up imaginary hypothetical situation where the Iranian-Iraq war ends early with a peace settlement, which leaves Iran with most of its war machine still available. The Soviets are not happy about that because their invasion of Afghanistan has been interfered with by the Iranians. The Iranians provide arms and support to the Afghans, and they help the fight against the Soviets there. So the Soviets decide, hey, these Iranians need to be taught a lesson. So they send how many divisions? How many divisions did the Soviets start with?
I didn't count. Somewhere around 15 or 20.
15 or 20 Soviet divisions, mostly mechanized, start moving south into the Iranian countryside, coming in on both sides of the Caspian Sea with everything they got. The best bombers, best fighters, best tanks, best BMP-3s, everything that they can throw against us. This is a major land battle, and it was incredibly fun. This was an excellent game to play. For people who are not familiar with this type of game, this is a more or less a simulation, much more than an actual game. This is not something you can sit down with your friends, have a group of friends over, throw down some peanuts or beer or whatever and just play for a little while. This took us months to complete. As you can see, the table is here. It's been sitting in Joe's game room since January? Since December?
December.
Since 8 months. It's been roughly about 8 months. We play about twice a month, getting about 2 or 3 turns done with each session we played, ultimately ending on turn 30. So here we are. So Joe, I have to say you succeeded. You achieved, what was it? What level of victory? Marginal victory. Marginal victory determined by the rules of the game. The objective was basically to capture as many of the Iranian cities as possible. 11 got you a marginal victory, and
captured 12.
12 was where you ended up. 14 would have gotten the next level of victory. Substantial victory. So I was able to stop him from a substantial victory. So it was a fascinating battle. We had a really good time. Joe, how would you want to recap how it worked for the Soviets?
Well, the problem with the Soviets, my mistake, was I put way too much emphasis in protecting the approaches to Iran from the Indian Ocean. Now, I did sink 2 American carriers, a Nimitz class carrier, and the Kitty Hawk.
No. It's the older carriers.
They're both older ones?
Yes. The Nimitz is the only carrier that's still out.
Okay, I didn't get the third one. I did get a helicopter carrier too. Mm-hmm. But my grave mistake with the Soviet Navy was I didn't put enough emphasis on Diego Garcia. Mm-hmm. The key in this game, in almost every aspect of it, is supply and control of supply. And the island of Diego Garcia in the southern Indian Ocean is so critical to the American effort in the Middle East that I should have spent all my time worried about it.
Not nearly enough money, because every time there's a bombing run or major assault, you have to reduce your supply counts. Which everything
is consumption, yeah.
Right there. So
now I did manage to lay mines in the Straits of Hormuz.
That was also a victory conditions. Yeah.
And the Americans in 1983, if you don't remember your history, in 1989 we realized we didn't have minesweepers anymore. So the laying of mines in the Straits of Hormuz in 1983 caused no end of difficulty for the Americans because they lacked any minesweeping ability except for one helicopter squadron on one of the carriers that was sunk.
And I'm not even sure if that was on the order of battle. That was
and again, they send them into this fight. So the Soviets, which have 1 or 2 mine-laying units, were able to get in there before the Americans had air power to stop them. And I got mines in the Straits, which again was part of the victory condition.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was difficult. I got a lucky shot on your mine-laying bombers. As you came a little too close to some of my Iranian units, I believe. I was up around Mashhad and shot it down. And that was the mine situation could have been worse had that not have happened. Right. So
the Soviet army attempted to sortie out of Afghanistan and into central Iran. And they did get into central Iran, but that's where the American Army, 101st Airborne and some Marines, pushed them back. But the Soviets were too strong even then for the Americans and their small battalion-sized units to push them out of Iran and into Afghanistan. But the American B-52s, my favorite units in this game,
B-52s are
managed to destroy Soviet air bases on the periphery of its empire. So by the last third of the game, the Indian Ocean and the approaches to the Straits were entirely in Americans' control. I could no longer really struggle or challenge him down there.
Yeah. Although it's kind of, I mean, at this point, there's no Soviet naval units anywhere except for like a single. They have a minesweeper, I think, right? Or
I have a minesweeper that I wouldn't bring on the board anymore.
Yeah,
because I lost all my ships.
Yeah, on the seas, the United States crushed. We dominated.
But he lost 2 carriers.
But lost 2 carriers as a result, and that was costly. The dangerous thing are the backfire bombers, which normally are based in the USSR proper, far to the north, but they have incredible range and they have anti-ship missiles that can be launched far away from any sort of ability to intercept, and they're extremely dangerous, and they're carrier killers. To be no doubt about it, that's what they do. So when it comes to strategy, how would you have done your strategy different? What do you think you might have done differently to get your 14 city? Or was it 14, 13 cities?
14. I needed to get 14, and I had 16 to win it decisively. But
16 would have.
I would. I mean, again, Diego Garcia is critical. It's easily the biggest mistake I made in the game. Over here, I don't know that I would have done a lot differently as the game progressed, because the last time I played this was in the mid-1980s. It's been a few years since I played it. Had the game I would have learned how better to invest cities. This one single Iranian city over here in the far west consumed way too much time.
That would be east, yeah.
Simply because I did not attack it with proper strength.
Right.
I also never used chemical weapons in this battle. And
we didn't even look at the rules for chemical weapons.
I did.
Okay, all right.
I did. But
so why did you not use it?
I didn't need them against the Iranians.
Okay.
I was saving them in case I ever had to face Americans in strength.
Because
it's the first use that gets you points.
Oh, okay, all right.
Against the Iranians, Mark learned after a few rounds of losing cities that you park your militia in the cities, you put them in deliberate defense, and let them get beat up. And it was towards the end I learned that I got a pretty good formula for doing it, but it's expensive. As Mark said, everything you do requires supply.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of units, but at the end I could attack 1 or 2 cities in a turn, and that would expend my supply. So I would have concentrated a lot more tightly and moved faster. But again, the Soviet army, with its immense size, was able to really punch its way through the Iranians. As I pointed out to Mark, I had to break up over half of my army, 8 of its divisions, into regiment-sized units just simply to police and control my supply lines. Because the Americans are blessed with this special operations force of some 11 or 12 detachments that can constantly harass you in the rear. And if you don't protect your supply depots and your supply chains, he can disrupt your forces, because being out of supply not only keeps you from operating, it actually causes you damage. So a good chunk of my army as I moved south, had to be broken up into these, you see these red banded units that were merely there to police supply lines and cover important points so that his special forces units wouldn't be able to get in there and damage me. So,
and the special forces were in play all the way to the end.
All the way to the end, and they played a great role. They did a great deal of damage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so on the U.S. Iranian side, I'm not sure how I could have done too much differently. What I think, and this is just retroactively retconning what I could have done differently. Joe's right. The best use of the Iranian militia, and there's a lot of it, is just park them on top of the cities and let them defend the cities by themselves. The more effective Iranian regular troops, which there's not nearly enough, were terribly outnumbered by the Russians. But I think I would use them differently by keeping them away from the cities, possibly using them to do strikes against the supply lines as the Russians extend. I'm not sure exactly what that would look like. Obviously, it didn't work in this particular situation, but that's something I would have thought of. And for the U.S. side of things, the U.S. has just its biggest problem is getting everything to the battlefield. You can see here, there's a lot of red. Not a lot of big units. I mean, the biggest stack here is right here with two mechanized divisions and one armored division. One armored brigade. Yeah, 3 brigades. Not enough to really be scary. But on top of that, it takes time to get to Iran. So it was it's tough, and definitely planning is a major part of this game. I know that gamers probably go, planning what? But yeah, this is what you got to do. You got to think ahead, possibly 3, 4, 5 turns as to where you're going to place your bases, where you're going to place your supply depots, so that everybody stays well supplied.
One thing about this game that history supported, again, this was published in 1983. Victory Games, by the way, I think they make very good games. Mm-hmm. But their build-up, their mechanics and order of battle for the build-up and delivery of troops into the Middle East was very, very close to what actually took place in 1989 and 90 when the Kuwait War happened, when Iraq entered Kuwait. It took about the same amount of time. It took the same kind of units and the same challenges were faced. Only, of course, in 1989, we didn't have an active Soviet enemy trying to stop us. Mm-hmm. So the game actually was well-researched, well-designed.
It was a good time. Excellent game if you're into this sort of thing. This is not your regular Parker Brothers family night kind of game. This is when you sit down, you dedicate a whole table in Joe's room for months at a time while you grind it out. And if you're a history buff, if you're familiar with a lot of the military hardware that was used at that time, it's very interesting. It's a lot of fun. I know when I started playing, I did not know the NATO designations for a lot of these units. I would tell Joe, "What the hell is this?" And he would look at me cross-eyed and he goes like, "Well, it's your army. What the hell?" And I'm like, "Well, sorry, I just didn't. I missed that briefing." So, 2 X's is a division, 1 X is a brigade. But get this, 3 brigades makes a division. Hey, I don't know. I was not at that briefing. So anyway, Golf Strike is a fun game, and I recommend it for anybody that's got the time and a table and a house to do it in. All right, so anyway, take care, everybody. Happy gaming, and we'll talk to you all later.